Hello everybody, my name is Charlotte, or Charlie as most people call me, and I am the managing editor of the nano journals at the RSC. I've also worked on the energy journals and the physical chemistry journals as well, so I've worked on many different journals within the RSC's portfolio. And today I'm going to give you just a little bit of advice around how to publish your work, be talking about some tips and tricks, and also we'll be referring to the editorial board at the end of this section for some further comments during the panel discussion. There we go. So I thought a good place to start would be thinking around the life cycle of a manuscript, because I think this helps to really centre us around who is going to be reading our paper, and therefore kind of thinking about how we should go about preparing it. So initially we receive a manuscript at the editorial office and it will undergo an initial assessment. And essentially that's done by us at the editorial office, and we check to see whether this paper fits within the general remit of the journal. Is it in scope? Is it generally within our remit? And at that point, if we think another RSC journal might be a better home for this work, the work might gain more visibility there, it might be read more, we would suggest a transfer. And it's important to note that we're thinking about potential best homes for our papers throughout the whole peer review process. So it starts at that point. And if we think that the paper looks to be within the remit of the journal, we would send it to one of our editors, whether that's an in-house editor or an associate editor, and that will depend on what the peer review model is for that particular journal, who will then assess it again, thinking about things like transfers and suitability. And if they think it's okay, they'll send it out for peer review. And at that point, it's picked up by a reviewer. We try and send the papers to at least 2 reviewers to try and get a fair opinion. Sometimes we might receive conflicting ideas on whether the paper is suitable or not, so we may need to consult further reviewers before making a final decision. So it's really important to think about the different people who will be reading that paper throughout that process. And I think it really helps to put yourself into the shoes of those individuals and think, what are they looking for and how can I encompass all of those things? The editor, the reviewer, and the readers as well. How can I fulfill the needs that will make them happy? So we're just going to go through those very quickly. I won't dwell very long on the editor because we have some editors on the call who you can ask directly. But I just wanted to flag at this point that editors, although they're likely to be in a similar field, they're unlikely to be specialised in your exact field. And therefore, it's really important to highlight the novelty and impact of your work. Make it easy for an editor to see why your work is important. Describe the problem and the challenge your work is tackling, and contextualise your results against current state of the art. And areas such as the cover letter, the abstract, the introduction and conclusions are really vital areas that an editor will use to try and understand why the work is important and significant. And we'll hear a little bit more from our editors in a little bit. Reviewers, on the other hand, are probably going to be in a very similar field, probably the exact field that you're working in. So they want as much information as possible regarding the detail. So regarding the experimental details, they'll want to see any raw data. They'll be looking in depth at that supporting information you'll provide in a paper. So they'll, it's useful to format and organize that to make it easy for them. And it's also okay to open up about any difficulties you've experienced whilst doing these studies. The reviewer is very likely to be aware of those and may have experienced them themselves. So do still flag those within the paper. But at the same time, don't make the problem seem bigger than they are, because it's all about balance. And I think the last point here is really important, not to ignore or hide inconvenient references. The reviewer will be experienced within that area, will know the literature, and if you're not citing the relevant references, that could potentially be a concern. If this work is very similar to in kind of scope to an existing piece, then absolutely flag it and say what the difference is between your work and the previously published work. Similarly, if your work is disproving or conflicting something already published, highlight that, highlight and say what you're doing, why, and that's important. So please don't try and hide or ignore any inconvenient references. Address them fully, and really help. That will really help distinguish why your work is important. And finally, the reader. And I must admit, when I was a PhD student writing papers, I never really thought about this aspect. I always thought about trying to get my paper through the peer review and published, but I never thought about how I can make my article more attractive so that people will read it. And the title and abstract are essentially the advert for your paper. They're the things that people will see first. So they should be easy to read. They should clearly communicate what the research is about and emphasize why it's important. And things such as a good title and abstract will appear more frequently in search engines. So if you've got searchable terms, that's very important. And it will make people want to read your paper, which essentially is all what it's about. So, and the converse can have a detrimental effect. A bad title and a bad abstract might mean that people don't find your article and don't read it. So do think about these things when you're preparing your articles if you can. And the RSC has an author and reviewer hub available for writing papers. So this includes all information for authors and reviewers, and information around our policies and procedures as well, to really help you prepare your article and promote it as well post acceptance. So you'll be able to see on the right hand side some articles here about self-promotion, about our latest open access developments. So whilst there's specific information for authors and there's templates and things like that there's also some more general articles, so you're completely informed. And it goes without saying that there may be some journal specific criteria that you might need to take note of prior to submission. So I would encourage you to read each journal's website to make sure that you're fulfilling those criteria before preparing and sending your article. So something I'd like to flag is around our reviewer community. So obviously our reviewers are extremely important to the peer review process. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. And we're really grateful that they give up their time to do it. It's it's not a paid for job. It's a community-based thing. And it will really help develop your skills if you review for a journal, not just an RSC journal, but for any journal, because it will really help you understand the standards of that journal, and therefore that will feed into how you prepare your own articles for that journal, and will help you fulfill the criteria that we're looking for. It'll also help you keep up to date in the field, and give you some practice around giving constructive feedback and critically evaluating papers, which are all essential skills in your day-to-day lives, as well as in being a reviewer. And in terms of who our reviewers are, they are all qualified to PhD level or above. They are all active researchers, and they've all published at least one publication in a peer-reviewed journal of comparable impact and reputation. So that gives us some reassurance that they know the kind of level of work that we're looking for in our journal. And so it's something that I would encourage you to think about. And there are certainly some benefits to being a reviewer, apart from the ones that I've outlined already. So the RSC is partnered with Publons, which essentially gives reviewers recognition of their reviewing activities. Publons tracks, verifies and showcases the reviewer work whilst not comprising the anonymity of the reviewer. So it won't say what papers you've reviewed or anything like that. It will say the journal and the date that you reviewed. So it allows you to kind of publicize the fact that you are a reviewer for these journals, and that might be useful for you to use for your CV, for funding applications and performance evaluations. There are also some other benefits. So all reviewers are entitled to 25% discount off all RSC books, which is good. And also each year, each journal will produce a list of outstanding reviewers for the journal. We really do appreciate the time that our reviewers and our reviewer community take to review all of our articles, and we really want to say a big thank you to them through publishing these outstanding reviewer lists. So there are other benefits as well, and if you are interested in reviewing for a journal, you should reach out to the journal in question. There will be some contact details on each journal's webpage, and you should send your CV to them, and they'll do the rest. So the last couple of slides, I just wanted to highlight some good publishing practice, which are applicable guidelines really for RSC journals, but all journals. And these are guidelines for our authors, for our editors and our reviewers around expected code of conduct, best practice, because as a learned society, as the RSC, we have a responsibility to protect the integrity of the scientific record. So there's lots of things to think about, and there's lots of information on our website. But these are the key things that I'd like you to think about today around authorship, avoiding plagiarism and fragmentation of work, avoiding any unsupported claims, given in your work as well, and only submitting to one journal at a time. So to get more information around those things, please do have a look on our website, and it's definitely worth reading before you're considering submitting to us. We realise that even if an author makes their absolute best efforts to, publish, send us a paper and prepare a paper to a high standard, there may be mistakes and errors, and nobody's perfect, and that's absolutely okay, and nobody should panic about that. It's sometimes these things aren't found at the submission stage. They might be found at the publication stage after the paper's been published, and that's okay. What we would encourage you to do is, as I say, don't panic, and to get in contact with the editorial office, and we can advise you. We have processes in place that allow us to amend or correct any errors that exist in the scientific record of articles. So we may issue a correction notice or a retraction notice, but that will be in correspondence with the authors, and that will be a step-by-step process. And if anything like that has happened for an article, you'll be able to see the latest updates by clicking on the crossmark link. So all RSC manuscripts have this crossmark symbol that you see in the top right corner, and that will give you all the latest updates on the newest versions of the paper and the history of the paper as well.